Today, a Minnesota-bound special. Ron Scherer returns to talk all about whitetail deer. Ron explores our long history with this graceful animal. We examine a deer's senses. And we revisit a time when Minnesotans gathered to ensure a future for these wild creatures.
Minnesota Bound. Brought to you by Minnesota's select GMC dealers.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of Minnesota Bound. You know, in November, we Minnesotans share two great events. One of them, Thanksgiving, of course. The other is simply known as deer season. Coming up, we're going to take a look at our long historic relationship with the white-tailed deer and what an amazing animal it is. We Minnesotans love our walleyes. To prove it, the walleye became the official state fish as proclaimed by the legislature. Truth is, we also love our white-tailed deer, although it's never been crowned official state animal, thanks to strange politics in St. Paul. Oh, it's been nominated 8 times, as late as 1989, to be named official state mammal. And 8 times the proposal failed for lack of votes. Doesn't matter. Every autumn, more than 600,000 Minnesotans, or roughly 12% of the state's population, double the national average, cherish hunting the whitetail. It's in our DNA. Minnesota and whitetails go back long before white settlers arrived. The Ojibwe hunted Wawashkishi for venison to eat, buckskin to wear, and, plain and simple, for survival. In 1858, the year Minnesota became a state, is also the year a legal deer season was set. It was 5 months long, no bag limit, shoot as many deer as you want, no license needed. In 1899, the first deer hunting license was required. The price, 25 cents. Today, a deer license is $34. Early on, the hunt for deer was not a pastime, but a necessity, as early settlers, too, relied on wild game. Deer were actually scarce in the 1880s, especially in the state's northern half. However, as forest logging and agriculture expanded northward, whitetail populations boomed in response to the increased habitat and stricter hunting regulations. In 1901, the deer bag limit, which had been 5 animals, was reduced to 3 deer and a 30-day hunt. Only one time in Minnesota history, 1971, was the scheduled deer season canceled for lack of deer. So far, it's never happened again. And that's a good thing. A Minnesota deer season is more than a license to hunt. For more than 150 years, deer hunting has been an autumn tradition, a gathering of family or friends, often in something called deer camp, where, as they say, you can scratch where it itches.
Cheers. Off he goes.
Minnesota bow hunters and muzzleloaders share the same passion. Deer hunting is also big business, an annual gold mine expedition for jumping gold nuggets. DNR estimates the overall economic impact of a typical deer season is roughly $500 million. Of that, some $260 million in retail and $33 million in state and local tax revenue. DNR itself hauls in roughly $18 million a year in license revenue. This may explain in part why the state of the deer herd is of great importance to the Department of Natural Resources. Barbara Keller, DNR Big Game Leader, explains.
Well, I'm certainly biased, but I think they rank very near the top, up there with walleye, very iconic to the state. I've learned the hunters here are extremely passionate.
The DNR has a deer management plan to follow, but it's a tight rope.
Honestly, it's more like managing people than it is managing a wildlife species. Our primary tool for managing our deer population is through hunting. That's been proven to be the most effective way to manage deer. We have to work with the public to determine what their acceptance level is for deer populations in their area. The white-tailed deer is really a success story for our state. We probably have more deer now than we did prior to European settlement.
This autumn, more than 600,000 Minnesotans will pursue a deer population estimated to be about 1 million animals. Clad in camel or blaze orange, hunters invade the state's fields and forests, carrying with them hope and anticipation, including big buck fantasies or a freezer full of venison, including self-made jerky. When the hunt is over, roughly 1/3 of those hunters will return home with venison. The rest, some 400,000 Nimrods, will depart the woods empty-handed. One might think that such a low success rate would soon end our passion for deer hunting. Doesn't seem to matter. Hunting a deer is more than just killing a deer. If you hunt deer, you discover that truism. If you don't, you won't. Trying to outwit a white-tailed deer is a passion that knows no boundaries, never has, never will.
Up next, just how elusive is a white-tailed deer? Ask any hunter, and they'll tell you.
Minnesota Bound is brought to you by Minnesota Select GMC dealers, Rapala Ice Force, Star Bank, and by Pearson Salted Nut Rolls.
Up next, we'll explore the fine senses of a white-tailed deer, its nose, eyes, ears. And as I research this, I'm amazed that I ever saw a deer in the woods.
If you think about it, it's rather amazing that any Minnesota hunter ever bags a deer. A two-legged predator is no match for four legs. For millions of years, the animal we call the whitetail has been hunted for food by predators of all kinds. The whitetail may not be as productive as rabbits, but they're not far behind.
In really good habitat, actually a 6-month-old fawn can be bred and produce fawns that upcoming season. And yearling does and even moderate habitats can be bred and produce fawns. Twinning is very common in white-tailed deer, so most years an adult doe is going to become pregnant, and frequently she will have twins, in some rare cases triplets. And so the potential for these populations to grow quickly is very high.
This also explains why, from the moment of birth, a deer fawn is an elusive meal, being born without scent while also adorned in a camouflage coat of brown and white spots that melts into the forest floor. Today, the white-tailed deer we know has evolved into a finely honed, finely tuned escape artist, able to run at speeds of more than 30 miles per hour, covering 30 feet in a single leap. And we haven't even mentioned its savvy senses. A whitetail has a nose better than a dog's. A deer's nose has almost 300 million receptors, a dog 2 million. It can smell you where you are, where you've been, and how long ago. Some experts contend a deer can detect human odor from a half-mile away. If you've been long at a deer camp, there's probably some truth to that. A deer's eyesight isn't the greatest except at night. But don't make a move. A deer is far-sighted and doesn't see red or green very well. But swivel your head, move an arm, and you're busted. A deer's sense of hearing is very similar to yours, only its two ears can swivel in different directions like radar, meaning it can hone in on the sound. This may explain why most Minnesota deer hunters choose to sit in tree stands, to simply avoid detection. It's also the foolish hunter who ignores the wind's direction. If you think you can fool a deer's nose, let's just say that's not a good bet. Many a hunter has left the woods empty-handed after ignoring the wind. So too, many a wolf has gone hungry.
Closed captioning on Minnesota Bound is brought to you by Connecticut.
You know, it might be perplexing to understand that the same people who go out in the woods to shoot a deer are also the same people who love a deer, which brings up our next story. It's about the Minnesota Deer Hunters Association, which is really a love story.
Today, white-tailed deer in Minnesota thrive in our farm fields, our northern forests, and our city suburbs. Despite its beauty, we all may have a different view of the animal because they're everywhere. Deer raid farm crops, they damage vehicles. Deer collisions have killed drivers, especially motorcyclists. And if you try to grow hostas around the house in the vicinity of deer, well, don't. In 1969, however, the threat was much different. Deer were in deep trouble, in deep snow, in much of northern Minnesota. Founding member Rod Dimmich.
I was younger then, and I remember going out with my dad, and we cut browse, and we lost an axe in the snow. Snow was probably 36 inches, maybe 40 inches.
Something needed to be done. A small band of hunters from Grand Rapids collected starved deer carcasses and dumped them on the Capitol steps in St. Paul. The goal was simple: save Minnesota deer. Out of that battle cry, hunters organized to feed deer and later, in 1980, formed the Minnesota Deer Hunters Association, today headquartered in Grand Rapids.
It was a single issue thing. It was essentially to create more habitat for the white-tailed deer.
To make more deer habitat, the association actually recycled deer, selling donated deer hides to pay for more deer habitat work in the forest.
MDHA started with the objective of hunting, habitat, education, and legislation.
Today, the Deer Association has 63 chapters around the state and more than 20,000 members. Executive Director Craig Engwall.
You know, I think one of the things that's great, and I love the other organizations that are national, but this was truly the grassroots where there's a crisis in Minnesota and a bunch of people said we got to do something and get the legislators' attention.
The Deer Group also operates summer forkhorn camps for young would-be hunters.
In Forkhorn 1, the kids get their firearm safety, plus hunting ethics, you know, and all the hunting skills, the orienteering. Last year it was 869 kids that went to camp for 1 full week.
It's all about the future. It's all about the kids. It's about the resource. It's about the magic of deer hunting.
However, not all is blue sky for the future of deer and deer hunting in Minnesota. For one thing, deer hunters are disappearing, along with their financial support to manage deer. From the year 2000 to 2015, resident license purchases declined by 15%, due largely to Minnesotans under the age of 44 who have not taken up deer hunting.
The baby boomer generation constitutes the largest portion of our deer hunters. As they continue to age and leave the sport, they're not being replaced by youth.
In addition to fewer hunters, a greater concern at the moment is a fatal deer disease showing up in Minnesota known as CWD.
We think it has the potential to be really serious, and why I say that is it's a disease that doesn't just show up, do its damage, and move on. I don't think it'll be no deer. I think they're going to have reduced deer populations.
And nobody wants that to happen.
Right now, we would describe our infection as fairly limited, and we're trying to keep it that way, obviously. Our desire is to leave a legacy of disease-free deer.
Up next, Ron Schara shares his respect and, yes, his love for the white-tailed deer.
Minnesota Bound is brought to you by your local carrier dealer, Radco Truck Accessories, and by Totem Resorts, the premier destination for world-class fishing.
Up next is my own personal tribute to the white-tailed deer. When I was about 14 years old, I'll never forget, I was squirrel hunting in the woods in Elmwood County, Iowa, when I saw my first deer in the woods. It was a moment I'll never forget, and I never have.
When autumn glows under the ruddy moon, this is your time, old friend of mine, you, the white-tailed deer. Your beauty is forever awesome. Your grace is nature's best. I never tire of seeing you, old friend of mine, you, the white-tailed deer. They say these are the good old days for you and your kind. You roam not only the fields and forest, but farms and even suburbs are homes to roam. There was a time, old friend of mine, when a century ago you were almost gone. Underappreciated, overhunted. In northeast Iowa, my grandfather in 1913 saw his name in a local newspaper for merely seeing a deer track. But that's history, old friend. Now the American hunter and wildlife managers have brought you back to more than 30 million strong. Now you're sometimes a pest crossing busy roads, eating money crops or expensive flowers next to my house. But I'll say this, you're still a pretty pest, graceful in every way. And here's to you, old bighorn buck, your antlers reaching for the sky. Such a royal and magnificent sight you are, crowned king of the forest. You are the fantasy of every deer hunter who's ever entered your domain. And that includes me, old friend of mine, you, the white-tailed deer. Since time began, I've been the predator and you the prey. For 1,000,000 years, we've played these roles. The result has been, I made you and you made me. Today, some say, our hunting game should end, that you're too pretty to be hunted down, that against me and my high-powered weapons you have no defense, you can't defend, they claim. Yes, they're talking about you, old friend of mine, you, the white-tailed deer, but they don't have a clue. Nature's laws cannot be changed. Over time, it was the very hunt for you that gave you grace and made your feet so swift and your eyes, ears, and nose so keen. These are the gifts to you, old friend of mine, from so many hunts so bittersweet. So if the world is listening, as a hunter I'd like to say, it's always a challenge and always a privilege to share the woods with you. So too, it's an honor to simply know you in your environment. You, old friend of mine, you, the white-tailed deer.
Well, that about does it. I hope now you have even a greater appreciation for the white-tailed deer in Minnesota. Those of us who hunt the deer have long learned just what a great animal it is, instinctive in every way. You don't have to hunt the deer to reach that point. You can go out in the woods with a camera, not in a city park, but in the woods. You too will discover what a great animal is the white-tailed deer. Thanks for watching.
Transportation provided by Premier Transportation. Call 1-800-899-7433. To get more Minnesota Bound, including full episodes, go to mnbound.com. And to follow our latest adventures, like us on Facebook.